All right, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I think you all are muted, so we're probably not going to hear you today, but welcome to this special hot topic session of the Delaware Association of Realtors. We are expecting a good amount of people in here this morning, so we have you muted, and we are together today because the Delaware Real Estate Commission is updating the seller's disclosure of real property condition form, and DAR has had quite an active role in updating that form. And so we are bringing this to you, our members, to just give you like a sneak peek behind the scenes of some of the logic, the rationale, some of the thoughts behind this new seller's disclosure form to answer some of your questions. The form's going to go into effect on July 1. And I am going to go ahead and introduce our forms committee, which these people, I know each of them personally. I think they are absolutely brilliant people. And I'm so thankful for them and their contribution to the real estate industry, to Delaware real estate. So first up, we have Tom Burns. Tom, can you wave your hand and say hi?
Good morning.
Morning, Tom. You're in Kent County. How long have you been in real estate?
44 years.
44 years. Wow. Next, we have Bruce Plummer. Bruce, raise your hand and say hi.
Good morning, everyone.
How long have you been in real estate, Bruce?
43 years.
43. That's fantastic. Next up on the committee, he is not with us today. RT Christopher had another commitment. Do either of you know how long RT's been in business? Like he's at least a second generation realtor, right? So let's just say 30 years-ish. Bobby Slagle, Bobby from Kent County. Bobby, how long have you been in real estate?
19 years.
19. Mr. John Ford from Newcastle County.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, John, how long have you been in real estate?
35 years.
35 years. Camilla Conlon from Sussex County.
Is having technical difficulties?
She's having a little bit of difficulties. Is she here now? She was flashing. She was glitching sort of in and out a little bit. I see Shirley Kalvinsky. Shirley, do you know how long Camilla Conlon's been in business? Oh, there's Camilla. Your lips are moving, but
There
we
you
don't
go. I thought you had to turn my mute off. Sorry. 35 years.
35 years. Fantastic. And next on the committee, we have Andy Taylor, which is DAR's legal counsel. Andy, how long have you been in real estate?
For 40 years and still learning every day.
40 years and still learning every day. You are a true student. There you go. And so you can hear that this is quite an experienced, committed group of real estate agents and brokers. And when I explain the forms committee, we've traveled across the state, met with each of the local associations. When I've explained the forms committee, the composition of the forms committee, we say that, it's a really healthy balance of Sussex County, Kent County, Newcastle County. And these are brokers, managers, agents that have been in business for such a long time. They're doing the jobs that we do. They've done the jobs that we do. And they're intimately aware of the challenges that we have. And so I am incredibly thankful for our statewide forms, especially our contract. I'm thankful that, simple things like the home inspection contingency, the financing contingency, how well thought out it is, and how much it makes just really good sense for our business. And then that feeds right over into the seller's disclosure. We've polled our members and we've asked, what are some of your challenges? What are you seeing? What's some of the advice that you have? Questions for the seller's disclosure. We were able to incorporate those questions into the form, recommend that to the Real Estate Commission, which you're going to hear a lot about that this morning. But this is such an incredible group of people. We also have, and I don't want to skip over him too quick. I think he took himself off screen, but Mr. Matt Lafferty is our staff liaison. So all of the forms that this forms committee works with, Matt is sort of keeping them all straight, making sure the formatting's right, making sure they're disseminated right. So yeah, without further ado, just jumping right into the session this morning, because we have 221 people in the Zoom right now, we're probably going to have a whole lot more joining soon. We're going to ask to save questions till the end. As you have questions, as these committee members are explaining the form, please type up your questions, put them into the chat. We're going to get to them at the end. The session is being recorded, so we want to make sure that the whole form is explained in its entirety by the committee, and then stay on for all of the Q&A. So I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Andy Taylor now.
Chrissy, before Andy starts, I'm getting some texts from people that can't seem to get in. And you said there's 225 people on and there's like 400 registered.
There are 400 registered. Yeah.
So I wonder if I don't know why she can't get the link.
All right.
Everything's working, so we're just going to push ahead here.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Tell them to try again. Matt and Wes are watching quorum. All right. Andy, floor is
Good
yours.
morning. Good morning, everyone. So I think Wes might share a little PowerPoint that I put together just as a way of introductory remarks here. So we're here today to talk about the seller's disclosure, and wanted to cover, yep, here we go. And we'll go to the next slide here. Whom does Andy represent? That's me. So I represent the Delaware Association of Realtors and NICBOR. Occasionally I'm asked to participate in a special project for SCORE. I'm very conscious of avoiding conflicts of interest. So I represent your interests, not other people's interests. I do not represent the Delaware Real Estate Commission. DREC is represented by the Delaware Attorney General's office, so a deputy AG is assigned to represent the Real Estate Commission. So next, we'll see here that we're here to, next slide, to talk about revisions to the seller's disclosure form. It had not been revised by the commission since 2017. DREC sent a letter to DAR asking for our input on the seller's disclosure form. We value very much the opportunity to work with the Real Estate Commission. DAR invited input from all members. The DAR Forms Committee reviewed all of those comments received, and then DAR made suggestions to the Real Estate Commission, which had a subcommittee to work on this. And they accepted some of the suggestions from DAR, rejected some others, added suggestions of their own. Certainly, it was a very good process, and literally, and that subcommittee has had professional members and public members, and through that, we literally read every word of the form out loud. So that forced us to take the time and look at it all carefully. Next, with seller's disclosure slide here is the Real Estate Commission approved it at their April 13th meeting, made a minor revision to it at their May meeting. And as Chrissy mentioned, it is effective for listings July 1st and later. The Real Estate Commission motion also made it clear you do not need to go back to use the revised form for listings that were entered into prior to July 1st, 2023. Then you may have a question, what if your seller wants to use the new form? I don't think the Real Estate Commission could fault you for that because the new form, if anything, is more comprehensive than the 2017 form, but you are not required to do that. The seller's not required to do that. That is not the standard of care. The standard is for listings effective July 1st or later. So next slide here. Just a reminder here to you that the form is required unless exempt. It's provided for under Title VI of the Delaware Code. I tell that to you to remind you that it is not required through the Licensing Act that covers you as a real estate licensee. It's through Title VI, through the Prohibited Trade Practices, the Buyer Property Protection Act, and the Real Estate Commission has a responsibility for developing the forms. We'll go on to the next slide here. And so, as you know, this is required to be completed by sellers of 1 to 4 family residential property, even for sale by owner properties, and the seller is required to disclose all material defects known at the time the property is offered for sale, or that are known prior to the time of final settlement by updating the form for any material changes. Through this process that we're talking about today, there have been no changes to the exemptions that are provided for by statute. And as you know, the Buyer Property Protection Act leads with a carrot, not a stick. And the carrot is that for defects that the seller discloses on the seller's disclosure form, the buyer shall not have a cause of action back against the seller or the real estate licensees for other defects that they might find after settlement, that the seller did their best job. The form is not a warranty or a guarantee by the seller that there aren't defects. It's just the good faith effort by the seller to disclose what they know. We're going to go on now to talk about the form, and all of us members of the committee are going to take turns. The Real Estate Commission will then be working after this on the revisions to the new construction form and the land only form. So today we're focusing on the one that they have made the revisions on, effective for July 1st. I'm going to kick us off here now with talking about section 1 on occupancy. And you'll notice right above that, see the bold words after the introduction. So within the introduction, there was a link added for the community flood maps that are provided through FEMA. And so that's a new link provided there. And then right after that, some bold print: seller shall answer the following questions based on seller's knowledge of the property. That ties right in with the Buyer Property Protection Act, that this is not a warranty or a guarantee by the seller, and the seller is not obligated to investigate things. If the form asks a question about something, the seller's answering that based on the seller's knowledge, not on what somebody thinks the seller, quote, should have known, but based on the seller's knowledge of the property, and they're not required to be making investigation about things. So you'll see that is repeated in each page where it has the heading for the yes, no, or the unknown or not applicable. And you'll see then Roman numeral 1 here talking about occupancy. We thought it was important. You'll see that it's added on question 2 when it's asking, is the property encumbered by a lease, option, or right of first refusal? Then the seller agrees to provide a copy of the rental/lease agreement to the buyer upon request. You might say, well, why not just have it attached to the form from the very beginning? Well, that's a confidential agreement between the seller as the landlord and a tenant of the property. We don't think the landlord or the tenant would want that just out there for everyone to be able to see. But this note is put in there so that it should jog the buyer to ask for a copy of that, or the buyer's agent to ask for a copy of that rental/lease agreement, so the buyer can review that prior to making an offer on the property. And similarly, if you take a look with question 5, asking about questions 4 and 5, is the property subject to a rental/lease management agreement? So this was added, and similarly then to the lease with question 5, is it binding upon the purchaser? And then the seller agrees to provide a copy of the management agreement to the buyer upon request. Again, that should jog the buyer to ask for that, or the buyer's agent to ask for that before the buyer makes an offer, so that the buyer would have a copy of the lease agreements and a copy of the management agreement to review prior to making an offer. As you know, there's a separate form for new construction, and there's also DEKIA that has the public offering statement. So this next series of questions here, 6, 7, and 8, really key in on those concepts. First of all, 6 is the property new construction. And then 7, if 6 is yes, has a certificate of occupancy been issued? If yes, when? If no, then stop using this form, because this is the wrong form. The form to be used then would be the new construction only form. Then if you go on to question number 8 here, the last question in this section 1. So question 8 is saying if 6 is yes, meaning that it's new construction, and also you've gotten to question 8, which that means that a certificate of occupancy has been issued, but basically this is the first sale of the property by the builder. Then this dovetails with another section of the Delaware Code. It first of all asks, is there a public offering statement required? And if the builder is providing a public offering statement because it's required by DeKalb, then that's going to have all the financial information in it that the buyer would need to know. This question says if it's exempt from providing the public offering statement by the builder, then the seller has to attach a copy of the documents in the chain of title that create a financial obligation for the buyer and a written summary of those financial obligations. So that would be over and above what this seller's disclosure form is asking, because that would be the builder's compliance with a different section of the Delaware Code. So that's your review there for you of Section 1, trying to highlight for you the changes that were made and a little other explanation, I believe now. So we're turning it over to Bobby Slagle for Roman numeral 2 here.
All right, so a couple of changes underneath deed restrictions, homeowners association, condos and co-ops. One of the first changes, which is an excellent change, number 9, is property subject to any deed restrictions. You'll note that they added examples for rental restrictions, pet restrictions, fence requirements, etc. I think that was probably one of the most incorrectly answered questions because people didn't understand what that was. So hopefully these examples will kind of jog their memories and know that a deed restriction would be something that has like fence requirements or, no pets or something to that effect. Let's see, the next 10 would be the same. Moving over, so 11 is the property subject to any agreement concerning affordable housing or workforce/inclusionary housing. So the word inclusionary was added. So inclusionary housing, includes municipalities or, locals that provide various programs that are aimed at affordable housing and have requirements attached to the purchase of those and possibly to selling those as well. So a lot of people just think of workforce as one thing, but we're really looking for any sort of programs, and hopefully that'll jog the sellers there. The addition in number 12 is the property subject to any private, public, or historic architectural review, adding historic in there as another review board. And then let's see, we added in the next one on 14, cooperative as a property subject to homeowner association condo. Cooperative is another type of ownership, which includes a lot of times apartments that are jointly owned by a corporation that's actually made up by the occupants. And then we did a little rearranging between the next couple of questions from what was previously there. So number 15 was aligned before, but now it's if number 14 is yes, are there any dues assessments involved? If yes, and reworded it to say frequency of payments and allowing the options for monthly, quarterly, yearly, rather than just how often is it due. And then number 16, are there any capital contribution fees due, which was already a question. Again, just kind of reordering. Are there any unpaid assessments, including but not limited to deferred water sewer charges for your property? Let's see, number 18, any special assessments? 19, have you received written notice, which this is different from previously. Now we're, instead of just saying, are you aware of anything that could have increased fees or dues? Now we're being definitive. Have you received written notice of any new proposed or board discussed increased fees, dues, or assessments? Kind of taking out that opinion or rumor aspect of the way the question was worded before. And then the rest of that remains the same. So I'm going to pass off the baton to Bruce Plummer for section 3.
Thank you, Bobby. Section 3, a couple changes. The first one is in question number 24. It reads, is your property owned in fee simple? It used to say just leasehold, but now it says leasehold / ground lease. A little bit of confusion perhaps by some folks there. So leasehold / ground lease hopefully will make that a little bit clearer. And then the following questions expanded upon that question quite a bit, getting more information. Number 25 says, what's the current amount? And it continues, it says, what's the frequency? And once again, like we did in other places in the form, we recommended check boxes instead of just a blank line. And so we have weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, or other, with a note to the buyer that it may be subject to change. Question number 26, an important one. If it's leasehold / ground lease, when does it expire? Also, I'll point out, you'll see a lot of places in the form. For instance, if you look at the end of question 27, it says, if yes, described in 16. Well, that has been bolded. Wherever it refers you to explain in more detail at the end of the form, we bolded that language to point that out. Going down to question number 29, you'll see it says, are there any variant zoning conditional use? The term conditional use was added. It did not exist in the previous form. Question 30, if 29 is yes, has the variance conditional use, once again, non-conforming use expired, or has it otherwise become non-transferable? Just a slight rewording of the question with the conditional use being added as well. Then we go to a couple new questions. Question 31 was changed. It says, is your property currently covered by a title insurance policy? It used to ask if you've had a policy within the past 5 years. That discount, as we understand, is no longer available in those circumstances. So we just have the question, has it been covered, or is it covered by title insurance policy? Question 32 and 33 are new. Did you participate in any mortgage closing cost assistance program that must be paid back at the time of transfer of the property? We're finding a lot of sellers forget about these things as the years go by. This should jar their memory, hopefully. Same thing with 33. Did you participate in any mortgage forbearance program? Forbearance being different than forgiven. Forbearance program, such as the CARES Act from COVID-19. So 32 and 33 were added to the form. And that completes section 3, and I'll pass it off to the next member.
Section 4 has a change in the actual title of the section. It used to be miscellaneous information. And the reality is section 4 is additional information. It's important information about the property that just doesn't really fit under any of the other subtitles. But we felt it was important to not make it sound like they're afterthoughts. It's important information that should be disclosed. The very first section, there really isn't any change to number 30. Well, it's number 34. It just says, if you have received notice, you need to describe that in paragraph 16. That's the addition there. Likewise, on number 35, is there any existing legal action affecting the property? If yes, describe it. So we just added a little more detail into those questions as well as the next two. Moving down into question number 38, there has been a change there. It used to say, is there anything you should disclose to a prospective buyer that may materially or adversely affect the property? So we took all that subjective language out of there. And as in the last couple sections, we've added more specific question. Have you received formal notice of any changes? That's the important thing. Not have you heard maybe in the future something might be coming. No, we're down to the real situation. Have you received formal notice, such as written notice of any changes that may affect the property? And the examples are zoning changes, road changes, utility changes, just to give folks an idea of what that might mean. Again, if a yes, described in paragraph 16. The next two, there weren't any changes. Number 41, again, one of the questions we've had trouble with all along, have you had or do you now have any animals in the house? So again, we're trying to clarify, bring it back to the to your knowledge and during your ownership. So that sentence now reads, number 41, during your ownership, are there now or have there been animals, meaning pets? We're not talking about, the little bunny that got under the porch one summer. We're talking about pets in the home and what kind. Likewise, on number 42, is there now or has there ever been? And we itemize swimming pool, hot tub, spa, whirlpool. And if there are, what needs to go in number 16 is if there are any defects, you need to describe them. And in number 43, if there's a pool, does it conform to local ordinances? And if it doesn't, again, you need to describe that in number 16 as to why it wouldn't. The additional questions there, again, things that don't really fit other places. These are not new. Type of trash disposal, the word community was added. A lot of the planned communities now, some of them you even pay through the HOA, and many of them request and some even require that you use a certain service because they want everybody to use the same service, so you have less trucks coming in and out on the roads. 45, we've done a little updating there. We have repairing and repaving. Who pays for the costs of those things? And added to that list of options is municipal. It used to say city or town. Granted, they're municipal, but we just thought this covers, it's just a broader term and it's used elsewhere in the document. Community or HOA. And as always, there is the other option. Then at the bottom of this section, the last thing in a change, I should say, to section 4 is just a notice to the buyer. We've noticed up and down the state, there have been some concerns with who takes care of the sidewalk in front of the house. Not unlike the 15-foot easements that so many communities have, because there's 50 feet wide for the road and only 20 of it is paved. So the 15 feet, you get to mow it, you get to walk on it, you have to weed whack it and keep the gullies clean, but you don't actually own it. And we found that up and down the state, a little bit of that situation is the same for sidewalks. You don't really own that sidewalk. It's common area and anybody can walk on it, but you need to plow it or shovel it when it snows. And in many situations, you need to take care of it too. If it bubbles up and it becomes a tripping hazard, it's a responsibility of the homeowner to repair that. So this is a disclosure to the buyer. I mean, the seller, if they know the answers to this, that's great. And then you as the listing agent can share that forward. But this is really a notice to the buyer that they need to look into that. They need to ask their agent, they need to read the Kiowa documents or the HOA restrictions and covenants, and to call the city of Rehoboth or Dover or Newark or wherever, and they need to find out whose job that is. And if somebody trips on the sidewalk in front of their house, are they liable for that? So that's a thing that has been coming up and down the state for some time, and we added it in as a notice to buyer, again, as a protection for all parties involved. Those are the changes in section 4, and I will pass it along to John Ford.
All right, thanks, Camilla. So section 5 is fairly brief, but the change starts with the title of the section. It is no longer environmental hazards, but it is now environmental concerns. So that has changed. Questions 47, 48, 49, and 50 remain essentially the same. However, they do have, as you've been told earlier, a bolded "if yes" described in section 16 for further information. So those are the first 4 questions. Question 51, has the property been tested for toxic or hazardous materials or substances, rather? The question is the same. However, if yes, describe in section 16 and provide test results. That's changed from the previous one that was attached results if available. So that is now and provide test results if the answer is yes. For question 52, has the property ever been tested for mold? Then again, if yes, provide that information in the test results. And so since the question exists, if the property has been tested for mold, yes or no, the question previously, is there currently mold on the property, has been eliminated. Question 15, has the illegal manufacture, storage, or use of methamphetamines occurred in the property? Again, if yes, describe in 16. And then there is one additional question at the end, question 54. Is there a wastewater spray irrigation system, either human or agricultural, installed on or adjacent to the property? So that is a new question for that section. And again, new section, environmental concerns, not hazards. So again, that's brief. And I think we're back to Ann.
Thank you very much. So question Roman numeral 6 here on land, soils, drainage, and boundaries. Not much change here. As has been mentioned before, the bolding of the if yes described in 16. I draw your attention to question 60. If 59 is yes, do you carry flood insurance? If you've answered yes to that, what is the annual cost of the policy? The note after that is what's new. Note to buyer. Public and or private flood insurance options exist for most properties, regardless if property is located in a flood zone. Inquire about options with a qualified insurance agent. This is the one minor revision that was made at the commission's May meeting. This came about through a representative in the General Assembly who was considering having a whole separate bill and a whole separate form about flood insurance options and disclosures, but thought better of that if the commission could add a note that you see here, then that would alert the buyer to look into that, even if the seller is currently not carrying flood insurance, that still is available and the buyer could ask their insurance agent about that. So that's a good upgrade there on the form. Then with the other questions, as I mentioned, just the bolding or adding, if yes, describe in 16. Keep in mind that more disclosure is usually better than less disclosure, and so we're trying to get the sellers to really take care of this and add additional information to describe that in 16, which is the blank lines, as you know, and attach additional reports or pages if they have those. And keep in mind your recommendation to the seller that they take their time with this form. It is to their advantage to be comprehensive with this, to disclose all material defects that they have knowledge of, so that they've fulfilled their duty under the Buyer Property Protection Act, and so that the buyer understands as much as they can about the property. And personally, I think the more comprehensive a job the seller does, the buyer then is going to not only appreciate that, but it's going to say, "Oh, the sellers, they're giving me a fair shake here. They're really, trying to be upfront here and disclose everything they know about the property. I'm going to take a serious look at this property and hopefully make an offer." So, with that, I'll turn it on to the next person here with structural items. Do we have someone for that, Wes, or am I covering that as well?
I think that's Bobby. Was that Bobby? Number
No,
7?
Andy was doing that one.
Okay, so moving right along to Roman numeral 7 here on structural items. Question 70 is a new question here. This is asked following on with 69, asking about were necessary permits obtained in compliance with building codes. And then question 70, if yes, are the permits closed? As you know, we have issues up and down the state sometimes with permits having been pulled, but then not yet having the final inspection done yet and closed with the government. Question 74 was expanded and made clear with the type of leaks we're talking about. Question 74, is there now or has there ever been any non-plumbing water leakage in the house? That's because there's another section of the form, as you know, that covers plumbing. So here they were trying to focus us more on non-plumbing type water leakage. And then question 76 isn't really a new question asking about problems with the walls, floors, windows. It was just moved from another place in the form, and the same type of thing as far as with insulation. Again, it was just moving around and some reformatting. One question that was removed was, are there any smells that were created by the drywall? That does not appear to have really been an issue in our marketplace, even back from many years ago when that started. It was certain types of imported drywall that were causing some smells and properties, but fortunately we didn't really have that problem around here anyway, so that question was removed. So that's your review with 7 with structural items. I believe it's going to John Ford for
Nope.
8
I've
here.
got number, Andy, I have number 8. That's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for the
Yeah, there we
transfer.
go. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning again, everyone. We've done some reformatting here, starting with the on section number 8. You used to say termites and insects. It now says termites, insects, and wildlife. Basically, there are not a whole lot of other changes in this. We have added in paragraph 79, sentence 79, is there an L or has there ever been? That's been restructured slightly. And that's your long-term knowledge of any termites infestation in the house. And then 80 changes back to during your ownership, have there been any termite or other wood destroying insect inspection? During your ownership, if the house had termites when you purchased it, it would have been the seller who would have had that termite inspection and not you. 81 is a big change. Is there now or has there ever been damage to the property caused by termites, other wood destroying insects, or wildlife? We added wildlife because you can have any number of different occurrences, anywhere from birds to squirrels, groundhogs and whatnot can get in or around the house and cause wood destroying damage that would require some kind of extermination. And then number 84, during your ownership, have there been any insect control inspections on the property? We clearly, this time around, we tried the first time before, and then we clearly have segregated the termites and wood destroying insects from other insect inspections. So now you get to, let's see, are you aware of any insect control treatment on the property? That's completely segregated from termite. People in the past confused inspections or treatments for insects with wood destroying insects, which is not the case. Now, number 86 is a new question. Are there now or have there ever been any bat colonies on the property? The reason that's in there, bats are federally protected. If you do have bats in your property, you have to get the feds involved with their criteria on when and how bats can be removed from the house. You just can't go flush them out of your attic. And that information is available. And then 87, the property currently under warranty or other coverage is the same as we had before. I'm going to pass the baton along to, let's see, who's got number 10? To Bobby. Thank you very much.
Well, let's see. Am I doing
Let's go
basement?
do 9.
Or number 9, I'm sorry.
No
Number 9,
problem.
Andy, you have number 9. Yep.
That's right. This will be pretty quick anyway. So
Okay.
basement and crawl spaces. Question 89 was added. The words were added, or has there ever been? So is there now or has there ever been water leakage, accumulation, or dampness within the basement, crawl space, or other interior areas of the structure? So the or there has there ever been was added, and or other interior areas of the structure was added. But again, keep in mind, this is within the seller's knowledge. So it's just if the seller has knowledge of water leakage that was, let's say, even prior to their ownership, but they have knowledge of it, then they would go ahead and disclose about that. They don't have to investigate that to see if there had been prior to them. And then moving on, there's, if yes, the bolding, if yes, described in 16. And so that's your update there for basement and crawl space areas.
All right, I'll take number 10 with the roof. Just a couple of little changes here. 92, you see that little that we added, if all roof surfaces not the same age, explain. There are a lot of houses that have multiple different roof areas with the different architectural styles. So not all of it gets done at the same time. And then number 94, notice that we added, are there any problems with the roof, flashing, rain gutters, and then skylights? So skylights also can have issues that relate to roofing and flashing. And then just a little bit of reformatting, but that's really the only changes under section 10. So I think number 11, we go back to Bruce Plummer.
Okay, thank you, Bobby. Section number 11, some of the questions were rearranged and renumbered, of course. I'm not going to cover that because it's just a rearranging of the form, but I'll go over the changes to the questions. Looking first off at question number 97, what is the drinking water source? There used to just be a blank line there. And once again, what we've tried to accomplish is to have the probable answers and to have them in a checkbox format. So it'll remind you or jar your memory and allow you to answer quickly. You'll see municipal, county, public utility, private well, or other. Then we go down to question number, well, let's look at question number 100. At the end, you'll see in bold, it says, if more than one well, describe. Sometimes a person will have a well for their home, for their drinking water and sewage, etc. And they may have a second well for agricultural purposes or for irrigation. And so this, the bold section was added if more than one well described in 16. Now, question 101 and 102 used to be one question and they were separated out. The first question, 101, what is the plumbing used in the water supply? And 102, what is the plumbing, what type of plumbing is used for drainage? So we've separated them and we've put in the potential, what we believe are the potential options, and allowed check boxes there. If you're looking at 101, there is a new category, that PEX, that was added. It actually is a cross-linked polyethylene. It's a tubing type plumbing system, which has become much more popular lately, and PEX was added to the form. Then if you go to question 103, here's a new question. What is the age of the hot water heater? And is there a tank or is it a tankless type system? Today, the tankless systems are becoming much more popular. Question 104, we before asked what the water heater fuel was, but we put the options in and we made two options for gas, both propane gas and natural gas, there being a difference, of course, between the two. The question 109 says, if 108 is yes, are the permits closed? We've done this in other sections of the seller's disclosure. Once again, just if you had to get permits, were those permits closed? That's an added question. Question 113 and 114 used to be one question. They were separated out. 113 says, if a septic system, when was it last pumped? And 114 is where it asks about, have you had the septic inspected by a Class H inspector in the last 36 months? Then we go to question number 115, which is new. This one has been a problem for years. If a septic system, how many bedrooms is the septic permitted to service? You routinely, and most of you have probably had this problem when you're selling a home with a septic, the seller will represent it's a 4-bedroom home, and yet when you get a septic inspection, the permit's for a 3-bedroom home. So this question was added, number 115. I think those are all the changes or additions in section number 11, so I'm going to turn it back over to Camilla.
Thank you, Bruce. Section 12 is heating and air conditioning. And if you could see, and be happy you don't have to see, the red line version, you would think this section has the most changes of anything on this form. But really, it is just significantly improved, we would like to think. In the very first question, it says, how many heating and or air conditioning systems are on the property? We all know that in this day and age, many, many, many homes have more than one zone. And the previous form only had space for one zone. So when there were two, you had to squeeze in. Number one was this and number two was that. And so now we've given the whole conversation enough space on the disclosure. So you'll see in 19 and 20, well, actually it's 119 and 120, type of heating system for number one. And it gives you all the choices that we always had. And mini split has been added. As everyone knows, they're very popular these days and a lot of people have them. So we added that specific kind of system. As always, there's a space for other. Likewise, when you go to question number 120, type of heating oil or fuel for the system. System number one, system number two. And the choices are there as they are for the other sections on the disclosure. But again, the space is there to do both zones. Then moving along, number 123, the question is, are there any contractual obligations affecting the supply, the fuel supply tanks or systems? And if you have that, if the answer is yes, you describe it in number 16. That will jog the sellers to know, if they own their tank, then maybe they don't have an obligation for their propane provider. But if they have a lease tank, then they do. And does it affect the property? Well, it does, because you can't just change propane providers unless you go through the hoops of figuring out how to trade in that tank. Again, the other changes down into the section just allow for system or zones number one, number two, plenty of space for all the questions. And I will now pass that to the next person on the agenda, number 13.
Okay, thank you, Camilla. So 13, electrical system. Very similar situation, a lot of changes to this, but many of those are just in the order of the questions. So if you are looking at the old seller's disclosure as we're going through this, make sure that you do get up to speed with just the order of the questions for this section. The question number one has changed for this, which is question 132 on the new form. Who is the electric provider for the property? An additional change is, does the property have circuit breakers or fuses? The addition is if more than one electrical panel described in 16. We also have a change to, does it have any 220 or 240 volt circuits? There's an addition of other there. That's question 136. Then for the, there's a new order of these. Again, is there a permanently affixed generator on the property? What is the fuel source is new. For solar and wind power, this has been updated with a note to the buyer. So you'll see question 141, any solar or wind power enhancements, and then below that, after you see if leased, what is the term, then there is note to the buyer. Transfer of lease is subject to approval by, and buyer must register with the Public Service Commission. So then we go down to question 144, which addresses the permit situation. And again, just rearranged for if there were permits, are they closed? And that summarizes the changes to section 13 electrical system. And I believe we're back to Andy again.
Thank you. So fireplace or heating stove. So this was, there have been questions on this before, but it was expanded to give the opportunity in case there's more than one fireplace or more than one heating stove. So for fireplace one, what's the type of fuel? Fireplace two, what's the type of fuel? And for heating stove one, the type of fuel, heating stove two, the type of fuel. So just with more homes these days having more than one, it was expanded to give that opportunity. And then a note was added, if there's more than two fireplaces or heating stoves, then explain in 16. And just a closing comment here before I think Bobby covers all the check off the boxes part. We know the form's not perfect. This form will never be perfect. technology changes, new features of properties become available. But the Real Estate Commission, I'm sure, will try to keep up with it as it's able to. So with that, I believe we're going to Bobby for the check off the boxes.
Yes. So many of you will notice those boxes that used to be before the list of what works and what doesn't work. There used to be boxes that had, there was an A and B to section 15. So section A had whether problems with ceilings, floors, patios. Well, those things have all actually been moved into section 7 under structural items. So they're still within the disclosure. They're just not an extra little checkbox that some people kind of forget to fill out anyways after they get through all of those other 90 questions. So those are still there, just in a different place. As far as the list of items that work or do not work, what is not a lot of changes in the first column. The only change is all the way down at the very bottom, second to last. It used to just be storm doors. It is also added now storm windows and doors. And then over in the third column, a couple of additions of electronic smart doors and locks, smart cameras and doorbells, smart thermostat. A lot of those, are affixed to the property. Sometimes they're left, sometimes they're not. And one other addition is a backup generator, whether or not that is in working order or not in working order. So that pretty much sums up those little changes. And then really just move on to the very last section where we finally have a full page of explanation room for all of those questions that need to have additional information, where we had kind of been limited to a half a page before. So that about sums that up. And then we have, I believe Tom Burns is going to finalize the acknowledgement by the buyer.
On the acknowledgement for the buyer, everything is the same except we added a key sentence. It's on the fourth line down. Buyer acknowledges seller has completed this form based upon their knowledge of the property. That's a broad statement, because in some cases, people have lived in the house for 20 years. They know everything about it. On the other hand, they may have lived there a year, or in a lot of instances, somebody may have just inherited a property. So they're filling it out to the best of their ability, but they may not know all the nuances associated with the property. So it's just an awareness factor for the buyer, understanding that the seller in good faith has completed this form based upon their knowledge of the property, which could be limited or could be expansive. It doesn't describe that. And that was the only change in that paragraph. Everything else is still valid. Okay, what else do we have? Does that complete the form, Andy?
Yes, I believe we have some questions from the chat. I can cover one if you want. There was a question about with Roman numeral 8, termite, insects, and wildlife. So a question was basically, well, what about mice? What about snakes? The Real Estate Commission subcommittee did have quite a bit of discussion about this topic, if I remember correctly, over the course of at least two different months of their meetings. And so what was focused on was not just have there been the presence of some critter like that, but has it caused any damage? So that focuses on question 81. Is there now, has there ever been any damage to the property caused by termites, other wood destroying insects, or wildlife? So it's acknowledged. I mean, what house hasn't had a mouse in it at some point? But the question is really, did the mice coming in cause damage to the property, right? Or as Camilla said, if there have been groundhogs or bunny rabbits or something, or their presence there, or did it actually cause damage to the property? So I assure you, the commission subcommittee had a lot of discussion about that, with the extent of disclosure about wildlife, and that's your explanation and background for that.
Great, thank you, Andy. There's a few questions in here that are not specifically related to the form. So Andy, if I can pose them to you, just real quick. Would a septic system on a newer resale home that is less than 36 months old have to be pumped and inspected?
Not the new, the less than 36, but certainly the buyer has the opportunity to do that. And so now that's assuming it's not one of the fancier type systems that, have to have the periodic maintenance and reports for that. But certainly the buyer would be wise to, ask to have a septic inspection done, which they can do, as you know, on the agreement of sale.
Thank you. Concerning section or question number 8, does this mean the seller can no longer wait for a fully executed agreement prior to sharing the Kiowa docs?
So I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but this question 8 is the one that focuses on the other part of the Delaware Code requiring the new construction builder to provide copies of documents in the chain of title that create a financial obligation. So, and that's if they're not having to provide a public offering statement. So if the builder is already having to provide a public offering statement, which more and more developments are now coming under that section of the Kiowa, then the builder wouldn't have to worry about this question 8, because they already would have disclosed all that within the Kiowa public offering statement. I'm not sure if that addressed the question or if I didn't understand.
I think you did. I asked it as it was written in there. I think you answered it. Let's jump on to the next one real quick. I'm not going right in order that they appeared, but has there been any discussion to adding cigarette smoke to the form? And I'll pose that to anyone on here.
Yes, the commission subcommittee had significant discussion about that as well. And just what you see as far as on the form is where they ended up.
Okay. There's a lot of thank yous in here. Let's see what other questions. Okay, why did you remove screens where present? Nowhere to put missing screens. Anyone want to take that one?
I'm not sure exactly why, but certainly a buyer could see, from walking around the property, what windows had screens or didn't have screens, and could ask about that. Or if they see screens in the basement or the garage, they could ask about that.
And
Okay.
Chrissy, if I may add,
Yep, Tom.
that's in the contract. In other words, you're buying where what's the language? Screens. What's the specific language on the front page?
Where present, that's in
where
the
present.
contract,
Yeah.
screens where
And-
present.
So I think we're covered there more so than in the disclosure.
Okay. And that's also in keeping with another question posed in here, just about inclusions and exclusions, if everyone's going to convert to utilization of a separate inclusion and exclusion sheet. I think you just answered that question too, Tom.
If I can just point out, within the disclosure, it's, is the item working or not working? So the agreement of sale, like Tom said, governs inclusion and
What's
exclusion.
included? Yeah,
Mhm.
the disclosure does not have the inclusion language anymore. That was removed.
Okay, good,
Bob.
good. Thank you both. Number 29, what is a conditional use?
So that's within the Board of Adjustment process of a county or a city. Within the zoning code, it will say these type of uses are permitted as a matter of right. These additional type of uses are permitted only if you apply for and obtain a conditional use permit. And then, after that, there could be variances. So conditional use is just within the purview of the zoning code and the Board of Adjustment.
And to add to that, Andy, isn't it true that the conditional use runs with the specific use that's been
Right.
granted? It doesn't run with the land like a zoning change.
Correct.
Yeah, the buyer would want to look at that if they were planning on making some different use of the property, certainly.
Okay. Number 51, does this include radon?
There's a separate radon disclosure. Has the property been tested for toxic or hazardous substances as AVS described? There's going to be, if the property requires the seller's disclosure form, then the seller is also required to fill out the radon disclosure form, which, as you know, asks, have there been tests and provide a copy of those tests. So I'd say that would be covered by the radon form.
Okay. There are several comments in here. If they're not questions, I'm not asking them to you. One question that's come up several times is, will we provide a highlighted version of the new disclosure? Andy or Wes, do you want to answer that?
Well, the difficulty with that, as a few of the presenters today have indicated, is if you look at strictly a red line of it, it appears there's a whole lot of changes that really there aren't, because things may have just been moved around or reformatted. So a true red line of showing absolutely every change, I think you might find actually a little more confusing. I think what's more instructive for you is sitting down with the old form and the new form and looking at it section by section to see, as this program is done, where the changes were made. I also saw a question somebody asked about, do you have to go back and use the new form for existing listings prior to July 1? No. So this is July 1 or later. So new listings, July 1 or later is what the new form is required to be used for.
Okay, and thanks, Andy. Here's a question that came really early on concerning the lease agreement. For a copy of the lease agreement, are there going to be a specific definition for method of requesting a copy?
And not within this form, but in the Licensing Act, it does say that, all notices should be in writing. So I would suggest, if the buyer or the buyer's agent's asking for that, to just shoot an email over to the listing agents, an easy way to cover that. That way it's clear exactly what you're asking for.
All right. Another question. Can someone please explain what exactly a swale is? Bruce, I think I've heard you explain this a few times. Do you have an answer for that one?
Well, I assume they're talking about the swale like in drainage ditches. I'm familiar with some communities where instead of having underground concrete piping or drainage, they'll have swales, or they'll have like a U shape in the ground to naturally cause the water to run off. A swale in the ground for drainage in the community.
And I something for buyers to be aware of with that, they can't just fill those in. Those swales are usually on the approved subdivision plans that were approved by the government to be there, as Bruce indicated, for the drainage of water. And they might even be covered by the local conservation district as far as the maintenance and the fact that they need to stay there.
And they're generally easements of record.
All right, so just another reminder that if you've put questions into the comments, make sure that you're directing them to everyone. If you've directed it to an individual, we can't see it. Is there a reason why similar language was not used in question 42? Question 42. Why wasn't similar language used like in question 41? During your ownership, has there ever been a swimming pool, et cetera? Is there a reason for that?
I believe with that, because if the seller knows that there was a swimming pool at some point, it can lead to the question, was it properly, but it's not there now, was it properly abandoned? Because some governments have requirements for how you have to abandon a swimming pool. So.
Okay. There is a question here about wastewater spray irrigation system. How would someone know if it's adjacent to their property?
Yeah, look out the window. It's over there. We can see it.
Don't stand on that side of the house.
So for those of you that are not looking at your phone and you're just listening in, you missed Andy Taylor just pinching his nose shut so he wouldn't smell it. Good response.
Well, the fairness about that question is this.
Thanks, Camilla.
When you live next to a spray irrigation, you know that, and the water sprays intermittently like an irrigation of any other agricultural thing. It doesn't spray all day long, every single day, 24/7. So if it's not spraying when someone is looking at a home, at a property for sale, they just think it's a farm field. And the irrigation lines they see potentially just spray water. Whereas the homeowner knows, no, that's the West Rehoboth spray irrigation. And in fairness and in fact, they're not such a bother. By the time they filtrate that water and spray irrigate it, it's practically drinking water anyway. But you can't tell when you look at it what kind of irrigation that is on the field next door, but the seller will know.
All right. Good answer, Camilla. Another question on here about mobile homes. If the title's been retired, how do we better clarify that on the seller's disclosure?
You mean as a Class C?
I'm assuming that's what the question's intended to ask. Yes, the Class C.
The seller should have it, right? And they often don't.
So I'll say that's an excellent suggestion to have additional information, but just so that everyone is aware, we were fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to, have Andy represent us at the Real Estate Commission subcommittee meetings to kind of help the discussion of some of the thoughts that we had as a forms committee. But ultimately, the seller's disclosure form was revised and approved by the Real Estate Commission subcommittee. So, there's certainly a lot of changes and suggestions that we may have had that didn't make it into the final version. But definitely keep that note for the next go around.
Yeah, good answer. Thanks, Bobby. All right, on item number 118, section 12, it asks how many systems, but during the discussion, you referred to zones. Who was speaking to number 12? It looks like it was Camilla. Some mini split systems have multiple zones. Should this be answered on zones or systems? I think it sounds like maybe a nuanced difference there.
Yeah. If a mini split system is generally a system that's like in a hotel and it's in the room, it's not two zones like with two. Yeah, I can hear the question, but it's not. It's one unit, and the unit does two different things.
Right. You can have it in an additional room built on the house, or a supplement as a bedroom or something. But it's an individual. There are not two zones on a mini split. You're correct.
All right. Let's see. I don't know that this one is a question, but just a comment. All right, here's another question. We've had buyers with unexpected, and then in parentheses, previously not charged to the buyer, settlement costs for info needed by attorneys from HOAs. For example, a $75 fee. Should this now be disclosed on the seller's disclosure? And can you clarify which line?
Well, that's in the DeKalb documents or the HOA documents.
Okay.
So
that also was a question that it looks like just was sent through. Is the seller responsible to disclose if HOA charges a fee at settlement prior to let's see, for attorney preparation and registered new owner. Okay. All right. So we're going to say DeKalb answers that. All right, here's a good one from Carla Wilson. You win the prize today because this is a question that I think I have a lot of people scratching their heads right now. I just realized I have incorrectly relied on section 15 of the seller's disclosure to transfer the inclusions and exclusions on the agreement of sale. Am I the only one? Yikes! Exclamation mark. Andy, can you speak to that again, the difference between and the relationship between the seller's disclosure form and the agreement of sale, specifically Sure. as it relates to inclusions and exclusions? And Carla, I'm going to answer your question. Are you the only one? No, you're not the only one.
So the seller's disclosure form is the opportunity for the seller to say whether or not those items are in working order or not. And then the agreement of sale is specifying what items are included or excluded. And so that's the difference with the form. And the DAR Forms Committee will be looking at trying to keep the boxes consistent between the listing agreement, the agreement of sale, and the seller's disclosure. So with these revisions to the boxes on the seller's disclosure, I think the Forms Committee will be taking a look again at those boxes on the agreement of sale and the listing.
All right, good. I believe that's all the questions that we had.
Chrissy, can I just go back to the last
Ma'am.
question?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
In section 2, question number 16 does ask if there's a capital contribution fee to the association, which I know isn't exactly what that question was, but it does call that out. Whether there's a fee to sign up, which frequently there is, and it's $75 or $125, that's not addressed here. For one thing, those things change, and they are in the Takaiwa documents. The other thing is, it's true, some attorneys do charge to, I guess, contact these various HOA management companies, but the seller can't possibly put that in the disclosure because it depends on who the attorney they're using is. Many attorneys also have a fee, and that's inclusive of contacting HOA associations, getting the dues, making sure people are paid up and that kind of thing. But the seller wouldn't be able to disclose in advance what the buyer's attorney might do.
That is a very fair point right there, Camilla. Here's another question that just popped up. Does the seller's disclosure address accessory dwelling units, ADUs? Tom, Bruce?
And not specifically, and that's more of a Newcastle County government thing that they have, what they call accessory dwelling units. That's if you're having like the in-law suite, that type of amenity to the property. So it's not specifically covered here, no, but they do show up, if they're approved, they do show up on the Newcastle County parcel view as being approved.
Okay. All right. One other question here. If the seller marks propane tank as being owned, can we ask the seller to provide the bill of sale?
Sure, you can ask. Don't know if they'll have it. Sure, you can ask.
All right. I think we've answered all the questions that have come in. We can go ahead and I guess wrap this up, or we'll wait another minute if there's any more questions that come up. But I just want to thank the Forms Committee for this incredible work that you've done, working with the Delaware Real Estate Commission, advocating for our members in the interests of their business. I know that you've spent hours upon hours reviewing this, and it's just a lot of really good work. And there have been a lot of comments to that effect in the chat too, just thanking the committee members for your work. Yeah, so thank you. All right, Wes or Matt, do you have anything else you wanted to add, or if somebody wants to jump on and just share where we can get the recording for this later? No?
Yeah. Hey, hi, everyone.
Oh, let me guess, Fast Facts?
Well, we'll send this out as a separate email to the membership, including the final document that I've been sharing throughout the chat. But we'll send that out probably later today or tomorrow morning. And it's also live on Facebook, so you can get the recording there on Facebook as well. That's it.
And just one last question. The effective date is July the 1st. Is there any harm done once the final document's posted in starting to use it now?
This is Andy Taylor. I mean, in my opinion, you could go ahead and start using it if you wanted to. It's not required by the Real Estate Commission. I don't think the Real Estate Commission could hold you, at fault, or a seller at fault for using the new form if you wanted to, because it's, if anything, more comprehensive than the old form. But that's not required. It's not the standard of care. it's not negligence if you don't do that. Did you follow my double negative there? So that's not required. I want to make clear it's for listings July 1st and later, taking effect July 1st or later. So if you put a listing on June 30th, use the old form, you're in compliance with the Real Estate Commission's requirements.
Thank you.
Excellent. One last question. When is
Tom's-
it available in .loop, DocuSign?
We'll work on getting that uploaded. I know there's still a pending question about a fillable form. We'll have to revisit that because that has come up a few times. We'll look into that.
That might take a whole committee, huh?
That'll take a lot of work.
Mr. Tom Burns.
Andy, obviously this goes into effect July 1st. The seller's disclosure for new construction and for vacant land we're working on, they have not been approved by DREC at this point. Will they also have an effective date of July 1st?
No. So with the new construction and the land only, you continue to use the current forms. It's going to take a matter of months, I'm sure, for those forms, and DAR will try to keep you all advised as to progress on that. So certainly if you have comments on the new construction Real Estate Commission form or the land only Real Estate Commission form, send them into DAR. We'll put them through the process.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for jumping on. Wes, did you have anything else you wanted to add? No. All right. I hope you found this to be really informative. Watch for the recording. Make sure that if you're a broker, that your agents know about the form, the new form that's coming out. If you are a sales agent, please share this information with your broker. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a really, really great week.